Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Tunnel Vision, a show brought to you by USCFootball.com. I'm your host, Keely, Eure, joined by Ryan Abraham and Shotgun Spratling. We have a fun show for you guys today. It's a preview show, even though the game is on Sunday afternoon. Excuse me. So we'll be talking about the Cougars. We'll also be talking about two new position coaches we talked to. They're not new, but we haven't really talked to them so far this season. So we'll talk about what we heard from Kerry Colbert and Vic So'oto. I know Shotgun and I really wanted to talk to Vic So'oto for a while, so we'll give you what we learned from that. I'll also give you an update on USC's injury situation. I feel like every week we're giving you an update on USC's inside linebacker situation. We'll give you another update this week. Then you can also call us 512-4-TUNNEL wherever you are. We love answering your comments, questions, and concerns. And then you can also tweet at us, #TunnelVision. I'll put your tweet up on the screen. And wherever you're watching, I believe we are live on all three platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope. Put your comments, questions, and concerns. Shotgun and I will do our best to try and see them and answer them. But guys, like I said, it's a preview episode looking at Washington State. Ryan, I'm going to start with you. Just overall, what is your takeaway so far from this team? I know you kind of grouped them in the Colorado category as like very low expectations. What have you seen? I know they haven't played in the last 2 weeks, but what did you see from those first two games?
Yeah, we haven't seen Washington State. They've had 2 COVID bye weeks, but they should be coming back, I think, fairly healthy in this one. USC's missed one game, is going to try to get back, so we probably will see more players out for COVID on the USC side than the Washington State side. But coming into it, Nick Rolovich, we see what Mike Leach leave or a little later in the game, go to Mississippi State. They hire Nick Rolovich, which is a very fun pass-happy offense, but it's a run-and-shoot offense where Mike Leach ran an air raid offense. It's very different, but both of those guys, I think they were like 1 and 2 in passing in the nation. So Washington State kind of went with another passing attack, but this one's going to be a little bit different. I thought it was going to take a while, to be honest. Similar to what Colorado was doing, you bring in Nick Rolovich. He had brought in basically a whole new staff as well. So there was some staff continuity at Colorado, I think, that helped Karl Dorrell. For Nick Rolovich, it was a lot of new guys. So there was a whole new staff to put into place. They didn't have any spring practices to implement any of their systems. So I think there was going to be some issues there. Colorado got a safety that was, a quarterback who was a safety last year. Nick Rolovich brings in a true freshman from Hawaii, Jaden DeLora, who's going to be their quarterback. So a lot of concerns, I thought, coming into this one. But I was really impressed. Washington State right out of the gate beats an Oregon State team that just beat Oregon. I thought it was a feisty Oregon State team. They've struggled a little bit, but, they could have easily beat Washington. They didn't play well, I think, against Washington State, but Washington State looked good. So I think it's a pretty good Oregon State team that Washington State gets a win over. And they gave Oregon all they could handle, this Washington State squad, when they were playing. They were winning early on, and, Oregon kind of pulled away late in the end. But the 2 games we've seen Washington State, I've been really impressed with what they've been able to do. That's without a whole bunch of guys. They had a bunch of guys out for COVID. Max Borghi, their best running back, hasn't played yet. He had a back injury. He could be back this weekend, and a true freshman quarterback. So you're going to see a little bit more focus on the defensive side of the ball than you saw with Mike Leach. They're going to run the ball a little bit more. Yeah, Shotgun's like, that doesn't really mean much, which is true. But just the focus of the defense at all, I think, means something. I think it'll be similar to what we saw when Alex Grinch was the defensive coordinator there, where it's more about speed and attacking. And that's just kind of what you have to do at Washington State, because they can't get the bigger, faster guys. They have the smaller guys play in different positions. But they will run the ball more, too. And if Max Borghi's in there, you're going to see these guys catching balls out of the backfield. If the offense is clicking in a Mike Leach game, you're going to see them just throw almost all the time. For Nick Rolovich, they're going to probably be running the ball pretty successfully. So they got a mobile quarterback. USC's had trouble with those. So this is definitely going to be a challenging game for USC, in my opinion.
Yeah, Shotgun, what's your assessment of this matchup for the Trojans?
Yeah, Ryan talked about how the offenses are different but similar. It's a similar type of passing attack where you're trying to spread the field and attack spaces in between in the run and shoot style. They're going to throw the ball a lot, but they will run the ball more consistently. Whereas Mike Leach wanted the touches that his running backs would get would be swing passes and stuff, and he considered those runs basically. He was basically about dividing up the number of touches across the 5 eligible receivers, including the running back. Whereas in a run and shoot offense, you want to run the ball, hand the ball off rather than throwing it out to the back out of the backfield. So it's a little bit different in that regard. And that could be a lot different based on if Max Borghi is back, because he is a unique and dynamic weapon. He was electric in Mike Leach's system. It's going to be interesting to see how he fits into Nick Rolovich's system eventually. He is questionable for this game. So there's, it sounded like it was positive talk earlier in the week, and then today it sounded like the offense coordinator kind of pulled back a little bit on that. Don't know if that's just a little bit of gamemanship, not sure. But he's a guy that can change things a lot because he can make guys miss. He's elusive, misses tackles, a lot of things like that. So Deion McIntosh has filled in and been really good as their running back. He's a guy that's run for over 100 yards their first couple games, but Max Borghi brings a different element. So if they can add him in, that gives them a whole different type of weapon. They've got a couple of good receivers on the outside as well. And like Ryan talked about, Jaden Delora has been playing great. Now the question is, can USC confuse him? This is what you want to do with a young quarterback. Do you sit back and force them to throw into a zone like teams tried to do with Keaton Slovis last year after he torched Stanford and USC was able to torch Utah against man coverage? Or do you attack them a lot and try to force them to get off their spot, force them to make quick decisions? That's what USC is going to do. That's what Todd Orlando likes to do, is bring pressures. So he's going to bring pressures from every different direction and try to keep Jaden Delora's eyes moving the entire time. So that's going to be the key matchup for me in this game, is Jaden Delora versus the pressure that Todd Orlando is going to try to draw up. If USC can get there and get home on some of those blitz packages and just keep him uncomfortable, then I think that they have a good chance of slowing down this offense from what we've seen the first couple of games for Washington State. And then, like Ryan said, on the defense side, they actually care about it this year. So that's a big difference. Obviously, since Alec Grinch left, and he's now the Oklahoma defense coordinator, since he left, there just hasn't been that same emphasis, and they haven't been able to slow teams down as much. So if they can slow USC down a little bit, then that changes the dynamic obviously a little bit. Instead of it being a shootout like it was a couple years ago when USC beat Washington State on a Friday night, I think it was.
Mm-hmm. If you remember last year, Tracy Claeys was a defensive coordinator and got fired or left or whatever it was, like in the middle of the season.
UCLA game.
It was a mess. Yeah, that was the UCLA game where they were down like 50 to whatever.
Basketball score.
Yeah, that was insane.
Yeah. And in that sense, Ryan, what do you make of this team now? I know you mentioned the both Oregon and Oregon State game, but then I know every matchup is different, but then you have Oregon State beating Oregon. I mean, how do you look at this team knowing how Oregon and Oregon State went on to play each other?
Yeah, I think the Pac-12 North is pretty strong across the board. Is Oregon a playoff team? No, I don't think they are. They hung around with UCLA. I mean, even Stanford early on, that was close until Oregon pulled away. The Oregon's been a double-digit favorite every time, and they actually covered against Washington State, but it was like a complete backdoor cover sort of thing. I don't think Oregon's quite as good, but they're still a really talented team. I think they're the most talented team in the North. It would have been great to see the Apple Cup last week, Washington State and Washington. Obviously, that wasn't able to happen. We got to see Washington go down 21-0 to Utah, but I think this is a good Washington State Cougar team. I think you have really competent as coaching on the squad. I think Jake Dickert's going to do a good job running the defense for them. We'll see how they kind of develop, this year and then, going into next year. But for the future, I think they're good. But just for now, it just looks like a really feisty team, a team that you don't necessarily want to play. And they might have a little bit of a leg up with the 2 weeks off that USC didn't get to have. And will they be fully healthy? Shotgun talked about Max Borghi, and that's going to be a question, but just getting some of the guys back that, when you're practicing, USC's practicing this week, there's going to be a bunch of guys that are out that might be able to play in the game, but they won't get a full practice. Zoom meetings and conditioning on your own isn't going to be quite the same. So some of that stuff is up in the air, where a lot of those Washington State players that were out, did they have a chance to practice all week and get ready for USC? Those little kind of behind-the-scene advantages that you're not going to know all the details on, but it seems like some of that's, favoring Washington State here. But I would not, there's not a team you want to take lightly. I think it's a 2-touchdown They're a 2-touchdown underdog here, but I think this has the capability of being a very close game with a well-coached team and a competent quarterback that could give USC some troubles, and a USC team that had a week off, and we'll see if it's a bunch of offensive linemen out. Does that impact what's going on here? They struggled to run against Utah. Certainly not the kind of front you're going to see against Washington State. But if you got some offensive linemen out, maybe you do still struggle in the run game, and that's going to put more pressure on Keaton Slovis, and that's been a little up and down this year.
Yeah.
Nick Rolovich did say that they expect to travel 74 players, which is the travel roster limit for the Pac-12, which is really a positive sign for them that they are back healthy from the COVID and, at least have a full gamut of players to be able to travel rather than, he said, I think the last game that they played, they said that he played with I think 48 or something.
It was something
scholarship
like that,
players, which is under the limit, but they still wanted to play. So now they're getting back to full strength there. Whereas USC, just like Ryan said, you may have almost a full deck, but you're still having those guys that have been quarantined for 2 weeks that are basically going to get out of their quarantine on Saturday, Sunday. So they're going to be rejoining the team, but will not have practice. So we know it's the offensive line group, so that's going to be a big question mark. And just 2 weeks off is always, who is better prepared after 2 weeks off? Is it going to be Washington State? They haven't played for 2 weeks, and they're able to practice as a full squad. They're probably chomping at the bit to get out there this week in practice. Whereas USC, it's going to be, Clay Helton said there'll be more walkthroughs and stuff this week. I asked him about what kind of changes there would be, and you're not going to be able to go as many team periods and things of that nature just because you've had that a single position group get hit by the COVID quarantining and stuff with the contact tracing. So you may not be able to go full team periods when you want to. You may not be able to go inside run if you want to. Those are some question marks there. And Clay Helton also said that they're going to have to, their service teams are basically going to be the first and second string. They're not going to have the full depth chart to where you can use walk-ons and third string guys to go run Washington State's plays in practice. You're going to have to need your first and second string guys to do that. So it's going to be a different week of practice for USC. They're just going to have to deal with it. Gary Colbert and Vic Soto basically said the same thing. It's like we've dealt with injuries and stuff before, so we kind of just take it like that. We've got a thin roster, so we're just trying to make the most of it this week in practice. But that's going to be a lot different for USC. So how do they come out and are they prepared? And when you talk about Washington State, Ryan, one of the things that stands out to me talking about Oregon and Washington State, Oregon State, is all these teams, almost all the teams in the Pac-12, there's a lot of replacement, a lot of turnover this year at key positions, especially quarterback. So you expected to see progression from a lot of the Pac-12 teams. Now, we've seen that on USC, new coordinator on the defensive side, third week against Utah, the defense took a step forward. Now, is that a blip or is that a trend? That's what we want to see, this weekend against Washington State and going forward. But that's what you're going to see with some of these Pac-12 teams is that third, fourth, fifth game of the year that, maybe there's some teams that take some strides that didn't look good that first week. But now, once they get, they've worked with these coordinators for a little while and you've been able to get guys in the right positions now that they start taking steps forward. And that could be something that Washington State is a team that could do as well.
Mm-hmm. We actually have a caller on the line, so I'm going to go to him. It's our buddy Dave from Iowa, I believe. Hello, you are live on Tunnel Vision.
Hey, Tunnel Vision. Great to be back. Sorry I missed Sunday. I had some personal stuff to take care of. But I watched the replay. Ryan, you seem a little scared of UCLA, or at least, no, I don't want to say scared, but compared to at least your preseason predictions. Again, I'm pretty sure that's, development over talent, something that, we're struggling with. But, again, I'm just one thing I'd like to ask is, what would you guys think if we had, in a sense, Washington State's offensive coordinator in terms of the mindset of, a run-and-shoot offense versus the air raid? Just because thus far Washington State looks pretty good, especially they looked pretty good against Oregon. Love to hear your thoughts.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, it's funny. I was talking with, for the Podcast of Champions plug, David Woods, who covers UCLA, and he's like, yeah, the defense for UCLA actually looks entertaining to watch. They're aggressive. They're going after people. You watch Felton run the football. They've had a backup quarterback the last 2 weeks and won both of them. And, the offense looks good doing it. He was pretty baffled. He's like, usually you're watching these games, I don't want to claw my eyes out anymore. So that's that's someone that covers UCLA is yeah, this is pretty much out of the blue. They look like a really competent football team. There's talent there, and scheme-wise, it seems to be working. Why is it taking this long? Is it only a weird blip? I don't know, but they definitely look better. They look like a really tough team in the Pac-12. You know, they're only 2-2. It's the first time under Chip Kelly they've been 500 this late in the season. So pretty crazy.
Does it count as late in the season? It's technically early.
The first time ever was
Technically both.
2 weeks ago. They were
True.
1-1. That was the first time because he's 0-9 in out of conference games. So no out of conference games this year. I think that
That
sort of
helps.
helped him.
That definitely helps. Yeah, true. And there was another question that Dave had about
The run and shoot. And,
Washington State's offensive coordinator.
See, it's just the air raid that USC runs isn't Mike Leachy because of they like to run the football more. It might be closer to what you're doing. Now, some of the route trees and stuff and the passing concepts might not be exactly the same, but there is the element of, really effective passing game with an effective running game. So there's some similarities there, but I think a lot of difference. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a critic of the scheme. I like the scheme and stuff. And if they ran some kind of run and shoot thing, I wouldn't have an issue with that either. I just want someone that's competent, that knows their scheme cold and will teach the players to do it. And as long as you can do that, that's fine. What they had a couple years ago with the gumbo, that's what I don't like.
You sound like you're still reeling from the gumbo offense and having to watch that pretty much.
Go back to last year and look at the first couple games. You look at after the Stanford game where people go, "Oh, this air raid's just not any good." No, they'd be like, "Wow, look at what can happen with a freshman quarterback in the air raid. This thing's only going to go up." So I think don't make too much out of 2 games is what all I'm saying with Washington State. They've still got to put things in and continue to develop. Obviously, Rolovich has had success at Hawaii. So did Graham Harrell at North Texas. So, USC's offense should be taken off this year, and I think it's being held back a little bit by Keaton Slovis's lack of confidence, indecisiveness, arm trouble, whatever you want to call it. He's just not playing to the same level he was last year, and because of that, the offense hasn't really exploded like it could. And, you got to be able to run the ball in short yardage situations a little bit better. And I think that's a combination of the players on the field and the play calling that's been going on.
With what's going on with Keaton Slovis, do you think a week off helps or hurts him in his, maybe it's a mental thing, you have time to kind of breathe a little bit, or do you have more time to think about it? Where do you stand on that front?
I haven't really thought about that. That's an interesting point, Keely, because if you're coming out of the game, you don't have that many games, so you don't want to take too much time off. But there was good, there was bad. Do you get an opportunity to sort of calm yourself, a little moment of zen, and come out and just go gangbusters against Washington State? I think that's a possibility. So I don't, I think they'd rather have played, but it might not be a bad thing for Keaton Slovis's, mental preparation to have that week off and come through and then try to, knowing everything reassess it all, and then come out and just play and throw the football around to open guys.
Mm-hmm. Shawty?
It's interesting. I think that depending on where you're at, and the fact that they didn't practice, I think gives him a breath of fresh air, lets him get away from it, lets him breathe a little bit. I think, and now you come back to practice this week, I think he can have a clear head and kind of attack it. I don't think when you aren't practicing, I don't think that you're in it, focusing on it all the time. You're thinking about, Thanksgiving and, Zooming with family and whatnot during that time. So I think it's probably good for him at this stage in the season for him to get that breath of fresh air, and we'll see how he kind of bounces back from it. Especially if it was an arm ailment, that extra time off wouldn't hurt. So we'll see where he's at here, and if he comes back strong and playing. It's a new day. It's a new day of the week, So if they play on Sunday, it'll be unique to see where he's at. Jaden DeLora, he's had a couple weeks off too, so both quarterbacks are going to be, at least have fresh arms. We'll see what happens out there.
True, and in that sense, Chuck, and I know Clay Helton is very much about procedure and making sure that everyone's on the same page. That's why they do mock game week and they go to the Coliseum and make sure everyone knows how it is. When you move your whole schedule a day back, you play on a Sunday night or afternoon, does that change anything? Are you expecting anything? Because I know in the same vein, Helton goes, put the ball down and we'll play wherever, those coach speaks. Where do you think that does it impact USC at all if they're changing their schedule in that sense?
I don't think it impacts that much right now they finished their finals and stuff. So, the kids are out of classes and whatnot. So it's not like every day is basically the same. When they're basically isolated right now. The only thing that's different, you would say, is, oh, what sports are on this day? But hey, we just had an NFL game on in the middle of the day on Wednesday, so it's not even like that you got to kind of have a schedule and a rhythm there, like you normally would with NFL games and whatnot. So I think for them, it's just you just move the day, and it's kind of like quarantine was in the middle of May or something like that, April or May, when you're like, what day of the week is it again? Because I feel like the players, they're going to be locked in, and they're just going to be going about their business every day, going to the facilities and going to practice and stuff. So you don't really pay attention to the day of the week. More you pay attention to, okay, today's the padded practice, tomorrow's the the shell day. You just go from there, and you kind of lose track of the days when there's no class to kind of give you that schedule as well.
Mm-hmm. So like we mentioned at the top of the show, we got to talk to Keely Colbert and Vic So'oto this week. First time really this whole season we've been able to talk to him. Vic So'oto was someone we wanted to talk to just because the defensive line has definitely elevated its game in 2020. There's a lot of talk about Marlon Tuipulotu. Ryan, what did you take away from his media availability?
Yeah, I mean, I think of the two, he seemed just to be had a little more energy and was kind of more into it a little bit. I don't know what you guys thought. Like, Keely Colbert was just sort of like, it was like a bit, he was like looking around sometimes. It didn't seem like he was all that into it I don't know. I mean, maybe that was just me. But did you guys sense that at all?
Coaches are, it depends.
Yeah, it wasn't Graham Harrell like doing it from his car the one time. Like, that was very weird too. So that was very strange. He's like in his car, like,
driving in, yeah.
But when talking about, he talked a lot about Marlon Tuipulotu and some of the questions that he would ask, and how you knew he was progressing in the defense, and talking about their interior defensive linemen aren't just there to stuff to cause problems and logjam things. Like, they're in there to make plays and get stats, and he's someone that's doing that. And the relationship with Tuipulotu, and how they're maybe a little bit banter on the field, but they're not really. I mean, it's like you wouldn't notice that they were brothers if you're on the team and stuff. So there were some interesting dynamics, I think, when he was talking about that, the contributions of like a Nick Figueroa. I think Shotgun asked about getting a guy like Jacob Lichtenstein back, and didn't really. I don't know if we got a lot of answers about where we're going to see him or how he's back. But I thought he was really interesting as far as like talking about the defensive line. He's a young coach. He's only been around. He's been a defensive line coach for 3 years. He looks like he's a star in the making. It's just the sense you get from him. I mean, he looks like he could bench press all those guys. Yeah. So it's kind of like you respect him. But also, I feel like he's building that coaching acumen. That he's going to be someone that you're going to see get big time jobs, I think, in the future for sure.
Mm-hmm. Shotgun, your assessment?
Yeah, I think Vic So'oto, he brings a fire and a passion, and he's one of the guys that's, rallying the troops on the sideline, whether it's his group or not. And his group has been playing really well. Now, there hasn't been a ton of rotation. We're still waiting to see some of those younger guys. Dejon Benton's a guy that I feel like has been lost in the shuffle a little bit. Curious to see, what's going on with him. Unfortunately, didn't think to ask about it this morning. But the guys that are playing great. And, Vic So'oto says it all goes back to practice. If you don't practice hard on Tuesday, you're not going to play on Saturday, is what he said, or Sunday this week. But he said, what you do in inside run period on Tuesday is just as important to him as what you've done the previous Saturday in a game. So he wants to see you practice and practice hard. And those guys that are continuously practicing hard, he says, are the guys that are performing right now. He said Tuipulotu is a guy that, whenever he's out there, he just runs. That's how he described it. Well, what exactly does that mean? He said, well, everywhere he goes as hard as he can. So he's going 100% all the time. Doesn't matter if it's between drills or whatever. Even if he doesn't know what he's doing, he's going 100% at it. So a guy like Nick Figueroa, same thing. People kind of wondered, like, how is Nick Figueroa jumping up into the starting lineup? He was kind of a forgotten guy last year in the defense because he's kind of a tweener. They didn't know exactly where to put him. Now he's in there, and he's been doing really well, getting pressure on the quarterback and stuff. And Marlon Tuipulotu obviously has been a beast for USC's defensive line. And Vic So'oto said it comes back to how he practices and how he's attacking the film room and stuff too. And he said you could tell he loves the game by the question he was asking, which Ryan touched on. He said he's asking questions like specifics about the offense coordinator, what the offense coordinator likes to do. He said, oh, did you notice this thing in the third quarter that they like to do this? Have you seen this too, coach? Those type of questions that are really in-depth and specific rather than what's my job on this play? What's my assignment? Rather than the vague and general questions. He's been very specific. He's rarely into it. And I think having his younger brother here has has pushed Marlon Tuipulotu to another level. I think having those two and them building off each other has been really good for both of them, just because it's a competition. It's a sibling rivalry. You see it in the basketball court, Isaiah Mobley and Evan Mobley. When you get your sibling around, you're like, well, I got to do better than young brother, And if you're young brother, you want to always, pass your older sibling. And the older sibling's always like, nah, the crown's mine. You got to stay down a little bit. So you have that competition built in, and I think it's helping both those guys.
Mm-hmm. I forget the specific quote, Chuck, and I know you know it, though. Vic Soto said about pressures. Like, pressures are just missed sacks, in my opinion. And in that sense, how do you relate that to? I know you want to see the matchup between USC's defensive front and Jane DeLaura. What are you expecting from him and USC's counterpunch, if you will?
Yeah, that's something that'll be interesting to see what Todd Orlando does there. Do they use a spy again like they did in the second half of that Arizona game? Who's available at inside linebacker to be able to play? If Raylan Goforth, he was supposed to practice yesterday or go through their walkthrough practice they had. He was supposed to do some change direction drills. We'll see where he's at when we talk to Clay Helton tomorrow. Palia Naitiote has remained in concussion protocol as of the last update we got yesterday. So those two guys still are out as of now. So, who's filling in? Is it Raymond Scott and Tuasivi Nomura coming in behind Kanai Mauga? Is there someone else that jumps in the mix? Do you play with only one linebacker and you bring Talanoa Hufanga up in the box a little bit more? Do you use a spy more because Jane DeLaura is mobile? He's not necessarily a running quarterback, but he is mobile, can get outside the pocket. So what do they do there? Well, for the defensive line, Vic Soto, his quote was, "Pressures to me are just missed sacks." And he was talking about Nick Figueroa and talking about how he's a guy that gets there and hits the quarterback rather than just moving the quarterback off his spot. But he talked about how he tried to tell the defensive lineman that there's no decoys. I don't want you guys to be decoys out there. So they bring a blitz and they bring 6 guys and they want the linemen to take up a couple of blockers so they can open up a hole. He said, but I don't want you to just get stuck there and just be stuck on those guys. I want you to go attack the quarterback. He said every snap is an opportunity to go get the quarterback, so you need to be trying to do that. So that's something they're going to do. They just got to stay in the rush lanes a little bit better than they have a couple of times in the first 2 games. They did that better against Utah. So we'll see what kind of how they do. They may start out with some 4-man pressures and bring some blitzes and not spying at all, but then if DeLaura gets out for a couple third down conversions, you might see an adjustment like you did the last 2 weeks. I mean, USC the last 2 games has not given up a third down conversion in the second half. That's adjustments in game.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to jump to a question just because it relates to that. Dre Day on YouTube said, do you guys think that the defense will take another step forward, or do you think not having a normal practice schedule will affect their play?
It's a very good question, because one of the biggest things is tackling and being able to get those angles down and just the speed of the game.
Yeah.
When you have a couple weeks off, the speed of the game can change on you a little bit. When you're not being able to, especially this week, if they're not able to do team periods as much as possible, just are they being able to keep their angles correct and going full speed like they looked in that Utah game? They looked like they'd been in the mud for the first couple of games, and they kind of got out and got some green grass and started running full speed in that Utah game, where we're coming downhill very hard and heavy. And that's what you want to see out of a defense. Mm-hmm. So we'll see, where they're at in this game. The first quarter could be really telling. How much of it is, just the processing part of the defense, and that was why they were stuck in the mud versus, just shaking off the rust and being the first couple games in a, almost a 11 or 12 month period.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough because you did take steps forward in the Utah game. Now you have a week off. This is a defense that can put a lot of pressure on you, especially, where there's some issues. We've seen some issues with the interior linebackers. They love using the slot guys more than what we see, from Washington State in the past. They're going to use those slot guys a lot. That can really, make you, stretch and cover the entire field and play defense on the entire field. So they're going to put this Washington State offense is going to put some pressure on the defense. So if they did take a little step back, it's going to be problems. So they got to keep the forward momentum going, and hopefully that week off isn't going to, derail that.
Mm-hmm. You keep talking like this is an upset territory, Ryan. Are you trending towards that?
No, I'm trending towards USC is a double-digit favorite, which I will not be betting on the USC side if I was betting or whatever. I would take Washington State in the 13 points. I think USC is going to probably win the game, but I feel like it's going to be close, and I feel like it's going to be a competitive one. But I don't think USC is going to be a 2 touchdown favorite. Seems a lot to me. But, we'll see. USC's got the talent to definitely blow Washington State out. We haven't seen either of these teams for a while, so we'll see what happens.
Yep. Mark on YouTube also has a question. Will the CDC shortening the 14-day quarantine recommendation help USC get some of the quarantined players back earlier than expected?
No, it's too late for that. I think I think it's good for college basketball. I think it could be good soon, but I don't see the Pac-12 making some kind of decision today or tomorrow. I mean, it basically has to be, you have to make some decision in the next couple of days to change that. But I mean, it's good. So the CDC is saying, like, if you test positive after quarantine at 7 days, you can come out. And, it's up to each conference to kind of decide what they want to do. So the Pac-12 would have to get together, and the local, health officials of each county, and say, all right, we're going to follow CDC guidelines. If you were exposed, you don't have to be in quarantine for 14 days. You can do 7 if you test out, or 10 total. So that's going to be up, it's going to be a slow, I think it will get there eventually, but it's going to take a while for everyone to kind of adopt that timeline if they agree with it.
I mean, the Pac-12 can make the adjustment really quickly. It's going to take each school in their local county ordinances and local city ordinances to kind of push on the county and be like, hey, the CDC says this. Can we make that change? Can we make that? And keep pushing on it before that happens. So that usually takes a little bit of time.
Yeah.
We have seen things come together pretty quickly with different things, but I think there's just so much going on right now at the county and city levels, particularly in Los Angeles, that I don't think that's a top priority. Whereas when USC was able to kind of push on Newsom with the letter and everything, it was a little bit more calm at that point, just as far as all the political stuff, as far as whether they should do mandates and shutdowns and all that type of stuff. So I think it's low priority right now. So it's going to be tougher to get that to push across in a day or two like that, because that's what it would need. Just like Ryan said, it would have to happen. Would have had to happen today or tomorrow, really, for it to take effect, because I don't think that it's going to come into play on Friday and suddenly you get guys back necessarily.
Mm-hmm. We actually have a caller on the line, so let's go to him. I believe it is Keith from Irvine. Hello, you're on Tunnel Vision.
Hey, you guys are like my favorite show ever, okay, just to let you know.
Thank you.
I've seen you guys in person, a couple of USC games, and you guys are so great. So I wanted to talk a little bit about recruiting. I'm a Trojan fan, even though I played at Fresno State. I love the Trojans, and I want to hear from you guys what you guys think about our most recent pickup with the wide receiver that put from Oregon coming out of Modern Day. Also, what are if getting that recruitment for Corey Foreman would really turn the table for us to team up with Drake Jackson on the end, and any other insights you guys have in recruiting, I'd love to hear that.
Thanks, Keith. We appreciate it. Shoddy?
Where do we want to start? With Kyron Ware-Hudson, the wide receiver from Modern Day. His brother, Keon, is a defensive lineman at Oregon, so everyone thought this was kind of a done deal that he was going to Oregon after committing there. He's a big body. He's in a similar vein as a Kyle Ford, Brew McCoy, as a big-bodied receiver. Have heard some positive things about his development over the offseason, but that's hard to say. A lot of guys do. There can be some big jumps in their games. I wasn't a huge fan of him when I saw him earlier in his career, just as far as how far up his ranking was. I thought he was probably a high 3-star, low 4-star guy. But I'm hearing positive things about him, so we'll see. Obviously, it's just tough not being able to see players for almost a year now.
Yeah.
Basically for us. But if he has taken strides, I think there were rooms for areas where he could improve. And if he has taken those, he's, like I said, he's a big body. He's strong. He catches the ball in traffic really well. So there's a lot of things to like about him. And like I said, he kind of follows in the same mold as a Brew McCoy or a Kyle Ford. Maybe not as tall, maybe an inch shorter than those guys, but similar muscular guy that can go up and make some tough catches for you. So I think he follows in that path, and he's another guy that fills in as an outside receiver for USC going forward. You can team him now with Michael Jackson, the wide receiver from Las Vegas, who's more like an Amon-Ra St. Brown, can be used in the slot, can do a lot of different things. And I think you're putting together more of a complete wide receiver group in this recruiting class. Though they did lose a guy today, and Josh Moore, the safety from Atlanta, who USC was recruiting as a wide receiver. He said because of unforeseen circumstances, he will no longer be committed to USC. So A lot of times that usually means the school dropped him. Don't have the behind the scenes on that. Maybe we'll have some stuff in the war room, but we'll see if USC, if that's the case, are they looking at someone else, or was this a case of just replacing him with Kyron Ware-Hudson? Some question marks there. On the defensive line front, Corey Foreman is obviously still USC's top priority in the entire recruiting class. He's a game changer. Teaming him with Drake Jackson would be terrific, and that's why it's important for USC to play games and for Corey Foreman to see how Drake Jackson is improving. How is Marlon Tuipulotu improving? How are those other guys on the defensive line? Because that's what he's looking for. He's looking for an opportunity to compete and play immediately, but also development. And development has been something that's been kind of iffy depending on the position at USC in the past couple of years, and something that some of the top-end guys have been kind of weary of is the development there and the consistency of the coaching staff. With the unknowns about Clay Helton being fired or not being, there was big question marks there. I think he's pretty stable right now, and the stability there should only help with that recruitment as well. But there are a lot of suitors for Corey Foreman because he's the top player in the country. So he's a guy that USC is going to be on the entire time, but we won't find out that one, I don't believe, until after the early signing period. I think he's making his decision in January. Haven't listened to Greg Biggins did a podcast with him, 25 minutes. You can listen to Corey Foreman talking about his recruitment. Not sure if he says in there whether or not he plans to sign in December and announce at the All-American event in January, or if he's going to sign in February. Not sure exactly on that one.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Keith, for the call. We appreciate it. As far as just recruiting in general, it's crazy. Early signing period is coming up very quickly.
It's 2 weeks away.
I know. It's just crazy given how weird, we're middle of the season, but are we not? It's weird. What is your quick assessment where USC stands right now, 2 weeks away from early signing period?
Real quick, there's some big fish still out there. Shotgun mentioned one of Corey for sure. So looking at the trend, you see out-of-state guys decommit or whatever, and in-state guys switch their commitment from an out-of-state school to a local school. These kids are not going to be able to visit colleges for a year, from April to April. It's pretty crazy, the extended dead period. Does that push a lot of players to stay closer to home? A guy like Corey Foreman can go out and take visits and stuff, but not everyone can. And would you rather just stay closer to home when you don't get an opportunity, unless you really know where you want to go and you pick some place you've never been before because you got all these sure reasons? It's tough. So I think some of the local schools, there's a lot of local talent in Southern California. I think that helps USC. So watch that trend if you start seeing some decommitments to guys that might have been a long-time commitment to some out-of-state school, not just for USC, but for any place around the country, and they end up going to the local school. You might see some of that. But, USC's back up to number 7, I believe, in the 24/7 Sports rankings, and certainly has the opportunity to move up. Oregon's up there, too, still in the top 5. But can USC pass Oregon? Well, they have to get a couple of those big-name guys still on the list. And if they can, it could be a top 5 class.
In that sense, Shotgun, how do you think the battle, Oregon versus USC in recruiting, will end up going in 2020?
Everyone's kind of looking at that as now the Pac-12 battle. USC obviously has fallen a peg, from just being the dominant team and the dominant recruiting force. Oregon has taken steps forward, as well as Utah and Washington. Both those schools have taken steps forward as well. But USC, this class is so much better than last year. Just to start with, being up at number 8 right now is where they are now that Josh Moore has dropped out.
Okay.
Last year they were 64 is where they finished at. They're sitting currently at 9 for next year's class. So the recruiting efforts are much better. It's a unique year, obviously, with the coaches not being able to get kids on campus yet, but USC's done a really good job of getting some high-profile guys. But this is going to be an interesting time, this last 2 weeks, just because it's going to be interesting all across the country, because our kids suddenly going to realize and say, maybe I should stay home, especially with this uptick in the number of cases that are going on, the hospitalizations, whatnot. Maybe I should stay closer to home. USC has some commits from Washington, Texas, Florida. They have commits from across the country. Do some of those kids suddenly say, maybe I should rethink this? Obviously Josh Moore from Georgia decommitted from USC. You had Philip Riley from Florida has decommitted from USC. USC picks up Kyron Ware-Hudson, and one of the things he said about why he made his flip from Oregon to USC was to potentially stay closer to home with all the stuff that's going on right now. So, that's good for USC with a guy like Corey Foreman potentially. If he stays home, That's obviously much better for USC, but you got to look at their class, and there's some guys from out of town. Is Quay Davis staying here? We've had some updates on him on the P as well. So there's some guys in here that are there's some question marks going into signing day still. It's not necessarily a locked in class where USC is right now. All the local guys you feel pretty confident about, but some of the out-of-state guys, there's still some question marks.
Mm-hmm. Ibrima on YouTube said, what does USC need to do in order to land more elite California recruits? Too many kids seem to be leaving California for the East Coast.
I mean, it starts with win. Yeah. It starts with winning. If you're a top-tier program that's winning championships, division, conference, national, that's the type of programs that the elite kids want to go to. It's unfortunate for USC that the classes they've missed out have been very, very good Southern California classes. Last year and this year, there's some really high-end talent there. It's not like the top Southern California players, number 25. It's number 1, number 2, number 3 in the last couple classes. You missed out on some elite quarterbacks last year. DJ Uiagalelei, who's been playing for Clemson. Bryce Young, who's been getting some time for Alabama. CJ Stroud, Rancho Cucamonga kid who went to Ohio State as well. So, there's elite guys at the top you missed out on. This class, you got Jake Garcia, you got Miller Moss. Those guys are committed to USC. USC's still trying to make a run at Jackson Dart from Utah as well. So, they're trying to fill in that quarterback class since the room is going to be pretty bare once Matt Fink leaves, depending on what he decides to do after the season, since he will have an extra year eligibility. But there's some interesting things there. But it starts with winning. But the two things, just like I said, are stability with the coaching staff and knowing, hey, my position coach is going to be there. Hey, my head coach is going to be there. I like this guy. That's a guy I want to play for, that type of thing. But development is huge for the elite guys because they see themselves. Anyone who's a 5-star, anyone who's in the top 100 thinks they're an NFL player eventually. So they want to see the program that's going to develop them and turn them into that NFL player from what they are as a high schooler.
Mm-hmm. I believe Dave from Iowa called back and wants to chime in on recruiting and what Keith said, I believe. So let's go to Dave. Okay. Hi, Dave. You're back.
Hey, Tunnel Vision. Once again, blessed for you to take my second call. I'm calling back again because, I didn't call on Sunday. But so two things. One, I don't know if you guys saw Greg Biggs' article on Corey Foreman, but it kind of seems like Corey Foreman is really considering ASU. So I'm curious with your thoughts on ASU and Corey Foreman. And then second, watching the playback, I remember Shotgun, you responded to the whole Jamar Jefferson offer situation. I looked up his profile. It said that USC scouted him, so I'm curious, was the offer late enough that it didn't count, so to speak, or did Jamar kind of decline the offer?
I heard it was late in the cycle. I don't remember USC offering him. That's a better question for Gerard, just because it sounded like it was a late offer that they tried to add to the class late. They got Marquise Stepp in that same class. So, I think they're happy with getting Stepp if they can keep him healthy. That's a big question. But Jamar Jefferson was a guy that, he wasn't the top end guy. He wasn't a Stephen Carr. He wasn't, he wasn't even, a Byron Cardwell that's the top guy on USC's running back board from Southern California this year. He was a 3-star guy. So even though he was local, sometimes guys just, they develop. And Oregon State's a place where guys can go. And if you get that early playing time, he wouldn't have got any playing time at USC. He came in the same class as Marquise Stepp. How many times have people on this show, on our message boards, clamored for Marquise Stepp to get more carries?
Already tonight.
Jamar Jefferson gets every carry up at Oregon State because they didn't have the depth, because he was able to jump to the front of that depth chart and take over the starting role early in his career. Whereas at USC, Jefferson would either be where Marquise Stepp is or where Keenan Kristen is. And neither one of those guys, unless he just completely blew, Vavai and Stephen Carr out of the water, which I don't think necessarily would have been the case with the fact that he wouldn't get those extended carries. Now, give him a lot of credit. He has developed each year at Oregon State and added to his game. He looks faster this year than he has in the past. So you got to give a credit to a guy for taking the ball in his own court and developing himself in the offseason as well. So give him credit there. So I don't know if USC maybe made a late offer and it was it could have been on day of signing day, the day before signing day. Could have been that late. I'm not sure. I don't remember that recruitment very well to be able to go in depth on that one.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Dave, for the callback.
Also about Corey Foreman and Arizona State. Give Arizona State credit. They've been recruiting at a really high level with under Herm Edwards the last couple of years. He's got a bunch of guys from the Southern California area, including Chris Hawkins and Prentice Gill, former USC grad assistants. They have taken their recruiting to another level. Started with last year, really attacking Southern California, and Antonio Pierce, former Long Beach Poly coach. So they got a lot of ties in this area. So they're a legit threat there. They had Drake Jackson locked up, and then USC swiped him away right at the last second. That was a back and forth kind of battle. So that one was a tough one for them to lose. But if they get Corey Foreman, I think they would be happy with 1 or 2. USC is going to try to do the same thing if Arizona State is the team in the lead right now. But that's the thing with Corey Foreman. There's been 6 different teams in the lead, I believe, so far.
Yeah.
It goes back and forth. And
At the end of the day, I don't see them going to the Sun Devils. I mean, it's either going to be a big time program back east or like an Oregon or a USC, in my opinion. But I don't know who we'll see. Or like Shotgun said, Arizona State's been recruiting really well. That one just didn't. I don't know. Doesn't pass the smell test for me. But we'll see. We've seen weirder things happen in recruiting.
True. And speaking of Hawkins, we had Armand Hawkins Sr. in the chat earlier on the show. So thanks for stopping by.
He knows what's going on in recruiting.
He does. He definitely does. We had a question on Facebook. I think it's in regards to Chase McGrath. That was one of the newsier things to come out of this week. He entered the transfer portal. Parker Lewis did get the starting job at the start of the season. Michael says, what's the point of entering the transfer portal in the middle of the season? It's not like they can play for another team immediately, and we've already seen it takes an injury or exposure to the virus for reserve players to be needed.
I mean, a lot of times you just want to be gone. You're not going to play anymore. Like, do you want to be practicing on a team that you're the backup kicker for, and you feel like you were? I mean, I don't know if he feels that way, but does he feel like he was hosed out of the job or whatever it is? If he doesn't feel it went down the way, he's going to go into the transfer portal and like, hey, now I can start being recruited. Doesn't mean you have to go somewhere right away and play, but you're on the market. So, if you're dating and, you want to be married in July and you go, oh, let's start dating in June, like that's a little bit harder. You start dating in January, you got a lot more time to find that, that special someone and then be married in July.
Sure.
How's that?
Convoluted. It comes down to he's at a position where backups don't play. It's the same thing with quarterbacks. It's not like you can go in and, you'll get some playing time at the same time. If you find a spot where you're going to be the kicker, they're only going to take one kicker. They're not going to take multiple kickers. So you go into the portal now and look for a place where you fit. And once you find the right place, then you take that. And then the school that you have chosen, they're going to shut down looking for a kicker. Whereas if you wait, they pick up someone else now, and your school that you think might be a really good fit for you, no longer there's a possibility there.
Mm-hmm. Ryan's analogy was so convoluted, I forgot what the initial question was. So I was like, how did we get a marriage? But whatever works, Ryan. We had a question from Mark on YouTube that said, if USC had looked really impressive during their first 3 wins, where do you think they would be ranked right now? Did a Pac-12 team ever have a real chance at making the playoffs this year? Shotgun, I know you were a little heated about the college football playoff ranking system. Take it away.
I just, it's not necessarily where USC is ranked. It was just that USC went down 2 spots while not playing a game, while Cincinnati and Ohio State did not go down 2 spots while not playing for the same reasons. But 4 teams jumped over USC, including North Carolina, who lost for the 3rd time. And hey, they lost to Notre Dame, but they lost by 2 touchdowns to Notre Dame. They also have a loss to 2-6 Florida State. They have a loss to 4-4 Virginia. So don't suddenly tell me like they're a great team because they played bad. I mean, they played well and lost a game. Wisconsin has 3 games. They have a loss. They're ranked higher than USC as well. So it's not the number of games either that USC's played. If you can look at each of the factors individually and say, well, there's that other team that has the same thing and they're ranked higher than USC. Now, has USC looked great? No. Where should they be ranked? Probably around 15, in my opinion. I mean, 16 is the most common ranking for the media in the media poll, the AP poll. That seems about right. 14 to 16, 14 to 18, somewhere in that range, depending on how you want to rank the teams around them. But North Carolina shouldn't be ahead of them with 3 losses.
No, I agree with you there, Shotgun. It's pretty meaningless, though, when you found out the last week where, Oregon just wasn't going to be that high and that you thought they were going to be the class of the Pac-12. Now they lost, obviously, and dropped back down. USC is the highest ranked Pac-12 team at number 20. I think they kind of showed the Pac-12 like, look, you have to have top 25 wins. There weren't any opportunities to play out-of-conference games. You've only played a couple of games so far. You've had a bunch of ones canceled. I think a lot of things would have to have gone right for the Pac-12 to make the playoff. But the committee made it pretty clear, like, look, we're not going to take you as serious coming in. You better you look really impressive or have the resume of an Ohio State coming in where you were dominating all last year and you're just going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Ohio State's getting the benefit of the doubt being up there where they are. They've missed some games.
Wisconsin's getting the benefit of the doubt. They lost to Northwestern. Northwestern's not a great team. They're a good team.
They want to see top 25 wins. I think, does Wisconsin have like one?
No, they beat Illinois and Rutgers, I think.
Oh, so they don't even have a top 25 win.
No, they have there's nothing on their resume that says that they're really good.
But they're in a conference that has top 25 wins where the Pac-12 doesn't have any. Because there's no one in the top 25, so it's
Oregon
really hard.
State has a top 25 win, technically.
Right, yeah, but they're 2-2. They've got 2 losses. So, yeah. So it was going to be really tough, but things did not work out well. You can't have games being canceled. I mean, Arizona State, USC, Arizona State hasn't played a game since they played USC. So, there's no, USC has a win over an 0-1 team. What does the committee think about that?
Yeah, and that was one of the things that people said, well, USC, the teams USC's beat don't have a win. Well, they're 0-3 when they don't play USC. So it's not like they have a lot of games there to draw from. It's not like they're 0-12.
Yeah.
But they're still 0-3. That's a thing,
Yeah, but it's just.
It was more about not where USC was ranked or that even if they slid a couple spots. It was just the hypocrisy of it, of all them sliding while other teams with all the same characteristics, or with similar characteristics were not affected in the same direction.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and you can look at it and you can also look and combine that with BYU and where they sit and go, I tweeted this, the playoff committee is basically like, they play football in the West. Do we have to consider the West even as a football territory? We don't have to consider them in top 25, do we? They don't pay attention to the West at all. Oregon losing gave them an excuse to be like, all right, we can go to bed at 7 p.m. on the East Coast.
Yeah, that's where. So Arizona, just so you I believe they've lost their last 10 games. It might be 11 now with one more week. So they're on a pretty bad losing streak. And Utah, they're 0-2, and they end up losing their last. They have a 4-game losing streak. So
It's not.
It's
great.
not been it's not great what the teams at USC's played. Not that that's USC's fault, but that's
Yep. Yep. We're almost at the top of the hour, so we're going to go into rapid fire, gentlemen. Hugo has an interesting question on YouTube. He talked about how, we talked about USC might not have enough for service team and whatnot. He said, since there's a possibility of using the first and second string guys as scout players, won't that help strengthen the team? # Pete Carroll practice, ?
A little more ones versus ones.
I don't know if you go 1 versus 1s. You got to keep everyone intact.
That's the thing is the scout periods aren't necessarily competition periods. It's not the same. It's not 1s versus 1s. Even when even if they have to use 1s versus 2s, it's hey, here's a card. This is what Washington State runs. Okay, you're going to do this. You're going to do this, so that the offense can get a look and know what they're doing against it. So the defense knows what their assignment is. It's more of a teaching time period now. If you're a scout team player, you go as hard as you can all the time and try to impress somebody. That's when we noticed Sam Darnold. That's when we noticed Daniel Motorbebe or Deontay Burnett. When they were playing with Sam Darnold, like, oh man, this guy's making plays on the scout team against the first team defense, and those guys stand out to you. So you would love to give your guys to give you that look, but the priority of that is to teach what the other team is doing. How are we going to block it? How do we need to, what are we looking for as a defense to know what they're running, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Don says, how much of a benefit do you think opting out will help Jay Tufele? But playing has certainly helped Marlon Tuipulotu.
It's interesting. I think Jay Tufele could have increased his stock as well. So I don't know that it's going to help him that he opted out. I think that he'd already made his bones. He has plenty of tape from the previous years, but I think he could have increased his stock like someone like Elijah Vera Tucker has done, as well as a guy like Marlon Tuipulotu. Elijah Vera Tucker is probably a better case because he was already probably going to be a draft pick. Now he's just worked his way up higher in the draft. Marlon, may have been a late round draft pick, maybe even a fringe guy after last season. He's definitely worked his way into being a draft pick now.
We got a question on YouTube. Is Jacob Lichtenstein expected to play this weekend?
I would think so, though we don't have official word on
Really?
that. That might be
Interesting.
That might be a question for Clay tomorrow, because the big question was the acclimatization period and how much had he practiced, had he worked up to full pads and had they got him going full speed. I think he's a guy that, if he does well in practice this week, then yeah, I think you can throw him in there, special package or something. I don't think he'll play a bunch, but I think he's a guy that could be on the field still.
Listening to Soto didn't sound, I wasn't getting the feeling that he
No,
would, but
no.
why would you opt back in if you can't play? Like,
If you're not going to be
yeah, you should be.
used.
Yeah, so my gut's saying they're going to probably use him a little bit or
Throw
get
him
on
in there
that.
somehow.
When I asked Vic, I asked him, where do you expect him to line up? And he said that's something we'll find out through the week of practice. So I think that was interesting. So I think there's still some unknowns for Vic Soto about where exactly he's going to put him. He's got to see him on the practice field and see him going to really determine. He said because he's jumping in the middle of the season, it makes it hard to figure out. But he said he's excited he's back and he's excited the potential that he brings to the room. So we'll see.
We shall see indeed. Dakers on YouTube says, will Washington State run a 4-3-4 zone defense against USC?
I think they're doing more of a four-man front. I've not dug into the details of what they were doing, but I believe they're trying to do more of a four-man front, and I think they'll have some nickel and stuff in there as well. But like we talked about, they want to get more speed on the field. They'll take like a big, a bigger safety and drop them down to play linebacker. It's just a similar thing what we saw before, just because Washington State's not recruiting that level of athlete usually. So I think you're going to see a lot more speed. It might look like a 4-3-4, but there's some nickel looks with a safety guy that's actually playing linebacker. But I think they're going to do a lot more of the four-man front. So, that might be a little bit different from what you've seen in the past.
SNS Production says, do the wide splits on Washington State's offensive line hurt them facing USC?
I think USC is going to attack those splits. The way that USC's defensive linemen, and this was something that Vic Soto said today, talking about Marlon Tupelotu. He said, in this defense, the nose tackle doesn't just take up blocks. He's not there just to consume a block and let someone else go. He wants them attacking and being aggressive. So I think USC is going to try to shoot some of those gaps if Washington State sticks with that kind of look against them.
Mm-hmm. We had a question about USC's cornerback depth. Ibrima on YouTube says, how's USC's depth looking at cornerback for this year and the following year? Are they short in number / quality?
Cornerback depth, you feel confident because as long as Isaac Taylor-Stewart hangs around and doesn't transfer, if he's still in the mix, even if Elijah Griffin leaves early, which is a possibility, not necessarily a guarantee for sure, but you still have, two elite guys you feel like, even without Elijah Griffin, with Chris Steele and Isaac Taylor-Stewart. There's some question marks after that, and you got to continue to build that up and see where you're at if there's an injury or something like that. But you got three guys that still have eligibility, so you feel pretty confident in that group, I think.
Yeah.
DD Diego has an interesting question. He said, with the shortage at linebacker, could we see a Brew McCoy sighting?
No.
No,
It's fun to
unfortunately
think about,
not. It'd
though.
be fun, yes.
Yeah.
That would be fun, but that ain't happening.
Mm-hmm.
He would be more of an outside linebacker. You throw him in there on third downs and just attack the quarterback.
Trojan says, can we please, this is what I alluded to, Shotgun, can we please see more Marquise Stepp? I don't think Washington State can really stop him. You can if he's healthy, and he hasn't been healthy. That's the issue there.
We would have seen more against Utah as well, but he was not healthy and did not dress for that game. His reps increased from Arizona State to Arizona, and you expected him to take over as one of the top two guys. He had actually supplanted Levi Malapei as far as being one of the top two guys along with Stephen Carr in that combo, and Vi was used for special situations, 2-minute drills and third down situations. But obviously if you can't dress, then you can't be one of those top guys.
Coley wanted to know why we can't watch practice.
USC and county rules, we'll say. USC it blames the county, but they also allow certain visitors to come on campus, so there's still questions in my mind about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have one from Fowler Mario on Periscope. Are most teams that face USC playing a drop 8 most of the game now that we run an air raid? Not always drop 8, but dropping guys back into a zone is what's been most effective. We've seen that the most. We saw Utah do that somewhat, a lot more than they did last year when they tried to play man-to-man.
Yeah, every team is going to have some drop coverage in there. Everyone saw last year against Utah what USC does if you play 90% man. they torch you. Their wide receivers are too good. So every team, even Utah this year, and Utah was guided this year versus last year. Last year they had 5 NFL DBs. This year they have 5 new guys in there. So that changes a lot of things too. But Arizona State, people were talking about, they're dropping coverage all the time, but they weren't dropping all the time. They're mixing it up. A guy like Marvin Lewis, who's look at his resume, is not going to do the same thing all the time. But yes, teams are going to drop coverage and force USC to beat them underneath. Because the biggest thing is USC's athletes are so good, you don't want to get beat over the top with a big play. You don't want that to happen to you. And you want to force USC because they make enough mistakes to beat themselves. And, force USC, can you go on a 14-play drive without making a mistake, without taking a holding call and making it 1st and 20, without a false start, or without, just missing a block and getting a sack? Those things, that's what you want to force a team like USC to do.
And Kerry Colbert was asked about that today, about is it frustrating for you guys as a wide receiving group to be in zone coverage all the time? What do you have to say about that?
He didn't care. He's just like, it doesn't matter. Like, whatever. We go out there and catch touchdowns. It was something like that.
He didn't sound like that necessarily. Shotgun.
Yeah, that was a Maury Povich, and that was determined to be a lie. Yes, wide receivers want to be able to attack deep. So he can say he doesn't care. What they have to do is they have to attack and be able to consistently move the ball, and then teams will be forced to do other things. But as a wide receiver, you want to be able to attack deep and get that big play, deep ball. People celebrate a lot differently when they get an 80-yard touchdown than when they catch a 6-yard pass.
The biggest issue, though, for USC, I don't know what you think about the shotgun. If they're going to rush 3 guys, you can't have the offensive line have 2 offensive linemen trying to block someone that doesn't rush, and then one guy gets beat one-on-one, and you get pressure on the quarterback only rushing 3 guys. Something like that, then it's disaster because Keely Slovis has a lot of dudes out in coverage, plus he's getting pressure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the offensive line has been much better this year about things like that. There's not a ton of pressure that's been on Keely Slovis consistently. And he does a good job of moving around. His pocket mobility, his pocket awareness is pretty good. So he helps those offensive linemen out at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Couple more questions, then we'll do final thoughts and game predictions. Hopefully we'll have a game to predict. We had a question about tunnel vision. Ryan, have we figured out what to do considering our normal tunnel vision time is now taken up by the game?
Yeah, I mean, we could go up against Monday Night Football, I guess. I don't know. That's probably what we'll have to do if you guys are cool with that. Or
let us know in the comments. Will you watch?
Tell us what you want. We can't do it Sunday. The game's going to be.
We usually go against Sunday Night Football, so does it really matter in that sense?
Yeah, that's true. We might have to do some Monday Night Football action, but we'll probably have to do it. I mean, it seems like Monday night's going to be the time we have to do it.
Mm-hmm. So stay tuned for that. SNS Productions wanted to know, should Texas be throwing the bank at Urban Meyer during a national pandemic and when their athletic department is in a $53 million deficit, I believe?
I mean, if you want to be like the moral police about what you should be doing, we probably shouldn't be playing college football. But if you want to win football games and you don't like Tom Herman, throw the bank at Urban Meyer.
The thing is, it's not like the athletic department is throwing the bank. It's what the boosters are doing.
Yeah.
Boosters.
So it depends. In that situation, it depends on what the oil prices are.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, their biggest boosters are oil magnets. So
it's just it seems too much like last year for USC fans for me over at Texas. It's a little like deja vu in that sense. We had a fun off-topic question from Mark, who says, "Who or what was each of your top artists and songs on Spotify this year?" He has some guesses too. He guessed Beyonce for me. Great guess, Mark. Actually, not true. Probably one of the Atlanta rappers for Shotgun and some old person band for Ryan.
It would be an old person band. I don't know what it is.
Shotgun and I had the same artist for our top person.
How do you find out? Like, where's
you go to your year in review. Shotty, take it away.
We both had The Weeknd.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy listening. You can listen to it while you write. It also, you can jam out to it as well.
Sure.
Plus, he had a new album this year. So
such a great new album. And I was in the 0.05% of his top listeners. So
and I'm 0.1%. So we're both near the top.
Yeah. It's very.
I calculated and I listened to The Weeknd 27% of the time that I listen to Spotify.
Wow.
There you
go. I'm a yacht rock guy. I put a lot of yacht rock on, so there's a lot
yacht rock.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, hey, if you have the Peristyle, that was my top podcast of the year. Tag us on Instagram. We've been looking at people's posts, so we'd love to see what your top things of the year as well. Alrighty, guys. Final thoughts. First off, any final thoughts and game predictions? Ryan, how do you think this one is gonna go?
Well, quick final thoughts first. So far, No Pac-12 games have been canceled yet, which is good. Only
Don't
one
jinx
has been
it.
moved. Yeah, so knock, 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 and we'll see. So that's good. Well, a lot of times it's Thursday or Friday, but we've had some early ones.
Wait. Technically, there was a college Pac-12 basketball game canceled this week.
That doesn't count. We don't want to talk about basketball. So this is football. We're talking about football here. Yeah, so no football game canceled yet. It seems optimistic that these games are going to happen, so that'll be good. For me, I think that you're going to see the USC offense do well, but not. There's going to be some struggles. I feel like the offensive line isn't going to be 100%. I think it's going to be a closer game. You're going to see this Washington State offense put some pressure, and there's going to be some coverage breakdowns. You're going to see some guys break open, maybe some big plays from Washington State. They got that capability. They have the two leading receivers in the conference, I believe. USC has like number 3 and number 4. But I feel like USC is going to win 31-28. It's not going to be a blowout like the spread, but I think it's going to be closer. Maybe not as many points as USC scored. It's about, USC scored like 34. I think they're going to get a little less, 31, and Washington State get like 27-28, something like that.
Interesting. Shadi, I know when Ryan said that it was a 2-score underdog, Washington State, you made a little face like you weren't sure about that. Explain yourself.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. USC as a double-digit favorite is usually not covering the spread, and I don't think they'll cover this one. I think they will win. I think it'll be about an 8-point game, so okay. I'm going to go like a 34-26, 35-27, somewhere there.
All right.
Okay.
Well, USC scored, 33, 34 the last 2 games?
Yeah, and then I think if that's the case, then we'll have some groans from people that USC didn't score more points, and Clay Helton will probably say that, man, we left some points out there. If we just did this right, then we would score 40 or 50 points. I think that's my predicted plan of what will happen if the ball game does turn out to be 35-27.
Interesting. I'm going to say 42-35. I don't know. I'll say 42-28. How about that?
Oh, so they're going to cover the spread.
No, I don't know. I hate this. I hate this every year. It doesn't matter. Or every week. Ryan, we had a lot of questions. What is Yacht Rock? Not everyone knows.
Yeah, I can pull up some of the things. So
no,
it's like,
you don't have to.
Yeah, no.
Just name some of the artists.
So you heard Africa, that's been
Toto.
So Toto kind of songs.
Africa.
No, but I mean, that was one of the
Okay.
that became popular recently. There are a lot of kind of 70s, softer rock kind of stuff. It's
Jasper Smith says a smooth sound from the late 70s, early 80s.
There you go.
There you go. Jasper Smith coming in right there. Alrighty. That's going to wrap it up. Shotgun, I don't think you had any final thoughts, correct?
I had a couple of rapid fires.
No, we're done.
No,
with
we're
those,
good.
Yeah. We're
That's
done.
going to wrap
we're
it
done
up.
with rapid fires, yeah.
Alrighty. That's
ridiculous.
Shotgun. That's Ryan. I'm Keely. We'll see y'all on Monday. Stay tuned. Ryan, are you doing a halftime show?
Yeah, we're going to do a halftime show for show. And
One of the questions was TV plans on Sunday. The game will be televised on FS1, correct, Ryan?
FS1 at
4:30.
4:30.
Mm-hmm.
So
Time changed since last we reported on Sunday when we broke the news that the game was going to be moved, and they gave us a time. It has since been changed.
Yes.
Yeah. So about 5 o'clock, whenever halftime is, we'll do a tunnel vision. It'll probably just be me in my living room, and we'll discuss what's going on in the first half of the game.
There you go. That's it. Alrighty. That's Shotgun. That's Ryan. I'm Keely. We'll see y'all on Monday.